Welcome to the AI Brief from the YPO Technology Network. I'm Stephen Forte. Same week, three capitals, three very different answers to one question. On today's episode, Paris decides it would rather not run American software at all. Alibaba pushes AI off the screen and into a robot's body. And a third nine-figure bet lands on the unglamorous business of keeping your AI agents on a leash. If you caught yesterday's episode, you know Washington spent Tuesday telling foreign nationals who may and may not touch its best AI models, the first export control ever written on a model rather than a chip. Today, the camera swings to the other side of the Atlantic because while Washington was deciding who may use a model, Paris was deciding it would rather not depend on American software at all. Let me start there. On Tuesday at Bercy, that's the French Finance Ministry, their treasury, Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu and Public Accounts Minister David Amiel unveiled what they called a systemic plan to put sovereign AI inside the French state. The timing was not an accident. They did it the day before VivaTech, Europe's largest tech conference, opens its doors in Paris. They wanted the headline. Here is the headline. The DGSI, France's domestic intelligence service, their FBI, is terminating its contract with Palantir, the American data analytics giant, and replacing it with software from a French firm called Chapsvision. Now, Palantir was co-founded by Peter Thiel, who is about as closely aligned with Donald Trump as a Silicon Valley billionaire gets. So when France's spy agency fires Palantir, that is not purely a technical procurement decision. Everyone in the room understood the subtext, and that is just the marquee move. France is generalizing a conversational AI tool, they call it the Assistant, built on models from Mistral AI, the French answer to OpenAI, to roughly 1 million state civil servants. That follows a 10-month pilot with 10,000 agents across 6 ministries. The data sits in SecNum Cloud certified infrastructure. That's France's government seal for sovereign secure cloud, run by Outscale, the cloud arm of Dassault Systems. The pilot cost about $300,000. Scaling it to 1 million people costs about $700,000. France is committing an additional $655 million to AI through 2030, plus tools with names like Diplo-IA for translation, and a portal giving the Justice and Interior Ministries AI for sensitive work, like visa processing. There is even a health assistant coming to the national insurance site so that, and I am quoting the framing, citizens entrust their health data to an AI managed by the state, not a foreign company. Give the French credit for one detail most governments would never have the spine to include. Lecornu told his ministries that their use of AI will now be taken into account in budget decisions. Adopt the tools and cut your costs, or come explain why you didn't. That is not a memo. That is a budget with teeth. Here is my read. For 2 years, AI sovereignty was conference rhetoric, a thing ministers said on panels and nobody costed. This week, it became a procurement event. A G7 government fired a marquee American vendor and standardized on a domestic model in the same 48 hours that Washington weaponized model access. That is the demand side answering the supply side in real time. But the single most useful number in this whole story has nothing to do with geopolitics. France surveyed 2,000 of its own state agents and found more than half were already using what they called AI whore cadre, unsanctioned outside tools. ChatGPT and the like, shadow AI, staff using consumer AI tools their employer never approved with company data going along for the ride. The French state is partly doing all of this to give its people a safe alternative so they stop pasting government documents into a foreign chatbot. Treat that number as a mirror, not a French curiosity. More than half. If you have not handed your people a sanctioned AI tool, you have not prevented AI use. You have simply guaranteed it happens somewhere you cannot see with your data writing shotgun. The lesson is not abstract. Stand up one approved tool this quarter or accept that your most sensitive material is already living in someone else's model, which brings me to the second capital. On the same Tuesday, Alibaba launched Qwen-Robot in its first suite of embodied AI models. Embodied AI means software built to run physical robots rather than chat windows. The suite is 3 coordinated models that Alibaba frames as a hand, a foot, and a brain. One is vision language action. It turns an instruction and what the robot sees into physical movement. One handles navigation. One processes embodied video. Together, a closed loop for acting in the physical world. This is Alibaba walking away from the text chatbot race and betting on machines that move. You might think this is a China story that doesn't touch your business. Pair it with something we covered Monday, Jeff Bezos and Prometheus, his $12 billion bet on an artificial general engineer for the physical world. Now the pattern is bicoastal and binational. Western capital and Chinese platforms are both racing to weld AI into machines that build and move things. So watch the geometry of one 48-hour window. Washington restricting who may use a model. Paris swapping out whose software it runs. Hangzhou racing to put models inside robots. Three governments and platforms, three different bets on where the value and the control actually sit in the model, in the dependency, or in the machine. Here is the CEO angle, and it is concrete. Alibaba did to cloud computing what it is now trying to do to robotics. It commoditized the base layer until it became a cheap utility you rent. If the brain for robots becomes a platform service the way cloud storage did, the build versus buy math for physical automation changes fast. For anyone in manufacturing, logistics, or warehousing, the timeline for capable autonomous machines just compressed again. You do not need to buy a robot this year. You need to stop assuming the brain inside it will be expensive or far off. Now, the third axis, and this one is the quiet one. This week alone produced a third major raise in a single category, keeping AI agents on a leash inside the enterprise. Arcade, spelled arcade.dev, raised $60 million to be, in their words, the secure action layer behind every production AI agent. The founders wrote the authorization spec for MCP, the Model Context Protocol, the emerging standard for how an AI agent is granted permission to actually do things in your systems. Among the investors, Morgan Stanley. That was not the only one. The same week, Nucor raised $66 million to give AI agents identities and manage them like employees. Trust 3 shipped Agent DOS, a control plane, the central dashboard where you set the rules, with real-time spending caps and a kill switch. Earlier this year, Oasis Security raised $120 million, and CrowdStrike bought a company called SGNL for $627.9 million. Even the open source world caught the instinct. Databricks just open-sourced Omnigent, a meta harness, which is software that sits above your AI coding agents to compose and govern them, a layer of supervision over the workers. Look at what serious money decided in 7 days. The bottleneck to enterprise AI is not smarter agents. It is the ability to control, authorize, budget, and audit the agents you already have. The market answered a question half your boards are still politely asking. Here is the analogy that should land. You handed an intern your security badge for the afternoon and told them to be productive. Every door opened. The question was never whether the intern was clever. It was whether you could see which doors they walked through and revoke the badge when you needed to. That is the entire category funded. If I were sitting in your seat, I'd settle one thing before you scale agents past a pilot, decide who is the system of record for what your agents may do, what they may spend, and who can pull the plug. That used to be a science project. As of this week, it is a buyable capability with Morgan Stanley on the cap table. So here is the through line of the whole week. AI is being remapped on 3 axes at once: geography, who controls the models and who may use them; embodiment, software becoming physical machines; and governance, who controls what your agents are allowed to do. Washington moved the first axis Tuesday, Paris moved it again the same day, Alibaba moved the second, and $126 million in funding moved the third. The honest question for you is not which headline mattered most. It is simpler. On each of those 3 axes, the model you depend on, the machines coming for your operations, the agents already inside your walls, where are you exposed and do you have a second source? If you cannot answer that for even one of the 3, you have your work for the quarter. That is the YPO Technology Network AI Brief for Wednesday, June 17th. I'm Stephen Forte. If this was useful, send it to another member. I will be back tomorrow with more. Until then, stay sharp.